Sometimes it's difficult even for me to understand what I've become.
The search for deeper meaning caused him to look further, and so he ventured forth to commune with the cosmos.
My search for truth has led me here.
A shabby-looking swimming pool?
It's not just any swimming pool.
The same way that Zima Blue is not just any color.
It was a precise thing.
Though the reason behind it being so well known and the true significance of this color are two very different things. One, because of the artist Zima himself and the use of this color in his works to ensure that it is spread all across the galaxy. From staining the entire equatorial belt of a gas giant to altering the surface chemistry of a sun-grazing comet, there is no limit to Zima's art or the presence of the color known as
Zima Blue. The first thing I ever saw. It was all I knew. All I needed to know. At last, I understand the thing I sought through my art.
The color obviously holds a much greater meaning to Zima himself than just being his favorite or the first thing he saw. But even knowing the episode, we are still left with the question of, what should this color mean to us? And all I can give you, though, is what the story means to me. I say story because just like Alistair Reynolds' other Love, Death Plus Robots adaptation, Beyond the Aquila Rift, this too is based on one of his short stories. And just like with that episode, this one was shortened as well. And while it still has the core theme and story being told, it leaves out what I believe to be the more important takeaway, because while both are being told to us by Miss Carrie Clay, or Claire Markham in the episode, we miss out on the effect this meeting had on her, as well as Zima's true reason for telling her,
I want you to help me tell my story.
The last 2 months have been a very weird time for me because while on paper, technically, I've been doing YouTube full-time for the last year, it hasn't really felt like it until now. Between here and the new podcast Let's Split Up, there's been over 18 hours of new content posted that I'm in. That's more than all of the content I posted last year, and that's still not including the collabs that I've done. Understand, this is not me complaining at all. I just now have to figure out a new balance to this entire new weird life that has been given to me because of y'all. And I have to figure out how to have office hours and how to stay physical because I'm no longer just crawling in attics or in crawl spaces all the time, as well as figure out a diet since I can no longer stop at the gas station for every single meal. Which is why when Factor reached out to sponsor a video, I was very excited because this saves me so much headache of having to figure out what to eat as well as how to actually cook it when all of the kids are running around since it's currently summer and just dealing with everything in between as well as the cleanup. All of that is handled right here. It's very easy to make and there is no cleanup. You just eat it and enjoy it, and it's such a nice time. So of course I had to say yes. So while this is what the meals look like right after you pull them out of the microwave, this is what they'll actually look like shortly after, leaving you just as happy as I am here, and like 92% of people that use Factor who said it helped to make their life less stressful, not to mention the 97% of people that said Factor helped them to live a healthier life, which can include me, because while gas station food is technically food, clearly this is just a lot more nutritious, a lot better for me, and taste so good. If you would like to try Factor for yourself, you can head to factor75.com or click my link down in the description and use code POLTERFB50 to get 50% off of your first Factor box plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code POLTERFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a full year. And thank you, Factor, for sponsoring this video. Though keep in mind this offer is only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Now, I, of course, am making the assumption that you have seen the episode of Love, Death Plus Robots. I am covering the story from the book that Love, Death Plus Robots actually printed that has the original, story of Zima Blue in here. It's also got every single one of the other short stories and scripts that they used for every single episode of the first season, and the second and third season, and the fourth season. Because of course, I had to pick all of them up because so far, every single one that I have read has been much better than the actual episodes of the show, and the show was amazing. Now, I will say that this is one of those stories that begins at the end. So we pick up after everything has already happened, 1 week after, in fact, which is important for what has already occurred in Carrie's life. But of course, it won't make sense until you get the full reason for her being here in the first place. All we need to know right now is that our main character's name is Carrie Clay. She is the one telling this story to us, and she was there when Zima unveiled his final work. As he swam, I wondered how I was going to tell his story and who was going to buy it. In the pool, the swimming figure ended a length and began to swim back towards me. It's here that we cut back to before their meeting, where we find Carrie in this coffee shop in Venice. Well, within the 171st copy of Venice on the planet called Merjerk, and it's actually the third copy to be entirely made out of white marble, which is just a lot to take in at the beginning of the story, but there's all these little details throughout a lot of Alistair Reynolds stories that are just really good world building to show you that there's much more going on here, and many other places exist throughout the galaxy and throughout the universe, and to be so well known across all of them really shows you the influence of Zima, which is why when her and millions of other people had heard about Zima's final artwork being revealed here on this planet, as well as this being the place for him to take his retirement from public life, she's not overestimating, she's likely underestimating that number. And from the way she talks about the bill for her coffee, it seems like she might also be underestimating how much coffee cost here, because she's terrified to even get the bill. So when the waiter comes around and sets something down, she takes it with her heart pounding. But instead of something telling her how much she owes, she has received a blue letter with gold italicized writing on it, saying that she has been invited to meet with Zima, and that the bill had actually been taken care of, so she didn't owe anything for the coffee, and she had the thought to actually order another one, and then decided not to. Though regardless of how much it could be, it's no comparison to how much it would cost to have an interview with Zima, especially right before his final artwork is revealed. He's never done this before. He's never had interviews. He's never met with anybody. They don't even know what his private life is like or if he has one at all. So for Carrie, this is not just a big deal. This is the biggest deal, probably the biggest story of her entire life. And that line will have a lot more impact here in a little bit when we find out more about her life. But for now, she has 2 hours before she needs to go and meet with Zima's robot butler to get on one of their floating skyship things called a conveyor to take it over to his island to have the meeting with Zima. But instead, she decides to go ahead and head that way now. And when she gets there, even the robot butler is like, well, since you're here, we might as well leave. But it's as she goes to get into the conveyor that the robot has to tell her to leave behind her am. Because as it was mentioned in the note, there's no recording devices of any kind, not even pen and paper, and especially no AMs allowed. Though when the robot says this, she is caught off guard, trying to remember the last time she was even outside of the presence of this little green metallic hummingbird that follows her around everywhere, causing her not just to ask about leaving it behind, but to question what would happen if she didn't. And of course, the answer is simple. there just won't be an interview with Zima. But even for as uncomfortable as it makes her feel to leave behind this little guy, she knows that this is something she wants more than nearly everything else. This will be the story of her career. So she does. She tells the AM to stay here and she'll be back after the interview, and it listens. It flutters away without any question. She gets into the conveyor and they head towards Zima's island. I formed a test query asking the AM to name the planet where I celebrated my 700th birthday. Nothing came. I was out of query range, with only my own age-saturated memory to rely on. Like I said, there's a lot in this story you just don't get from the episode. We never know that Carrie is nearly 1,000 years old, or that she has this device called an AM that follows her around to help her with remembering everything that she has going on in life. We also don't get anything about the robot butler that is here transporting her over to Zima's island, who she has to ask if anybody else received this letter. And he says, no, it was just you. So if you would have turned down this interview, that would have been it. But he also tells her that they both know the chances of that were very slim, as well as telling her if at any point she becomes uncomfortable and wants to leave, they can do that immediately and they'll bring her right back here to Venice and she can go about her way. What we do get though is her holding up her invitation to both the sky and the sea, trying to decide which one it looks more like and how it sort of flickers somewhere right in between, because Zima Blue is a very specific blue. You could ask for it in any place that makes paint or anything that has color. You could tell them you want Zima Blue and they would know exactly what you're talking about, though no artist other than Zima really uses it unless they are making a statement about him. Zima, the artist himself, who we then get a very detailed description of, but it seems to be the understanding the majority of people would have before reading the story she will write about him, because she lists off how he had undergone these radical procedures to enable him to tolerate extreme environments without the burden of a protective suit, because his entire form was now made up of this synthetic material that had all of these different functions to be able to help him wherever he went. If he was somewhere where there's very dense gravity, he would be able to strengthen the fibers to where it wouldn't just completely tear him down. It would also be able to hold up against extreme heats and everything in between. He no longer needed to eat. He no longer needed to sleep. He no longer needed to go to the bathroom. He no longer needed any of this stuff, and he definitely didn't need to breathe. His body was completely armored against all of the different environments you can imagine, to the point that he was free to seek inspiration anywhere in the galaxy. If he just wanted to float through space forever, he could. If he wanted to stare into a star, if he wanted to go into a star, he could. There was no place Zima couldn't go. There was also nothing he couldn't see, because his eyes had also been completely reworked to see all of these different spectrums, to even bring in visual information and hear it as music, along with a whole myriad of other things Zima was now able to do with all of these different modifications that he's had, which is why many of his works were so different than everyone else, because he would be able to paint down to such a microscopic detail anything he ever wanted. But it wasn't just that his paintings were detailed, it's that they were huge. Starting off, he was doing these giant murals and landscapes of the galaxy in different places that he had been to that were tens of meters across. Some of them finding their way into private collections when other ones are popping up in these public spaces, but they started to really spread, especially because he could really pump them out. He had no need for sleep, so he could do the paintings in one session until they were completely finished. Though I find it neat because Carrie gives her own thoughts on his paintings when she first came across his work, admitting that they were very impressive to look at, but something about them felt so bleak, like inhuman. Like it was missing some sort of touch, and the only human part of it was from the perspective of Zima himself towards the painting and not in the painting on its own. She then puts it plainly that they were really nice to look at, but it was not something she would ever put in her own home. But clearly there were other people that just wouldn't agree with this. There was a reason his paintings kept popping up in all these different places and continued to sell to these private collectors. But I couldn't help wondering how many people were buying the paintings because of what they knew about the artist, rather than because of any intrinsic merit the works had themselves. That's the reason she didn't really pay much attention to Zima after he got his start. He was just another artist, and unless something happened to either him or his art, there wasn't really a story there. And still, it took some time for her or anyone else to notice something did change. Something happened. All of it beginning with this one mural that he unveiled, where right in the very center of this giant galaxy-spanning painting was a perfect blue square. So different and perfect that it seemed like the entire canvas the painting was on had been that color, and this was just a part that was missed. But when you got up close, you could see the difference in the rest of the painting and how there were these ridges and how the paint stuck off of the canvas, except for in this one spot. It was perfectly smooth in Zima Blue, the same exact color as the letter that is now in her hand. And I love that even in the beginning when she first noticed it, she knew that it meant something. Though I'm sure it would have taken her and everyone else a while to understand that it wasn't the shape, because the shape began to change from a square to a circle to everything in between, but the color was always the same as it slowly grew across his canvases to the point that it overtook everything else that was there, to where it looked basically like this. And it was just blue in the middle, and then on the outsides having a little bit left of the murals. All of this happening over the course of a decade, until one day Zima unveils an entirely blue painting, Zima Blue. But unlike in the episode where it is just the size of a billboard, the first one he unveils this way is the size of a 1,000-story building. It was already at this point that people believed this was as far as it would go when it came to Zima and this color that he's known for now. But they couldn't have been more wrong. It's here that the conveyor arrives at Zima's island, and Carrie describes it as being turtle-shaped and about 1 kilometer across, with just a thin beach all the way around. I find it neat, though, that the robot has to clarify the reason nobody shows up here is because they have this protective screen covering the entire island so nobody can see it from space. Though for what Carrie can see here in the conveyor, off in the distance on the edge of the island is a small blue rectangle that is surrounded by some sort of stadium seating or bleachers, but she'll find out exactly what this is here in a little bit. First, she makes it to the island, gets out, and the robot says Zima will be here in a little bit and leaves her. Now, with her not having her AM, she truly, for probably the first time in hundreds of years, feels completely alone. Though it doesn't take too long for Zima to come out of his house to greet her, allowing her to calm down for a minute, and then immediately become starstruck and tongue-tied to where she can only respond in like one-syllable phrases. She says, "Hi," and then he says, "Hey, let's go up to the house and sit on the porch and we can watch the sunset, because it's nice to watch the sunset, right?" And she just says, "Nice," and then follows him up to the house. He stopped suddenly and turned to face me. "I forgot to check. Did the robot insist that you leave behind your aid memoir? Yes? Good. It was you I wanted to talk to, Carrie, not some surrogate recording device. Carrie's response to this is just me, causing Zima to call her out on her one-word responses, to which she then admits that she is quite starstruck by him. Even though that seems confusing to him because he's like, you've interviewed so many other celebrities. I can't be that big of a deal. But again, this is that big of a deal. Zima is known all throughout the galaxy and has never done this before, which is why I love what she says next, because she has to ask him, why me? And he gives the goofy response of, you ask nicely, causing her to be like, okay, seriously, haha, what was the real reason that you wanted me to be the one to interview you instead of anyone else across the literal galaxy? And he does have a more detailed answer on the reason for selecting her above everyone else, but he does clarify that she did ask nicely, and he liked that. But he also did enjoy her work over all of these years and how she was very truthful in her reportings, having not even really had any issues with people coming back and complaining about any of her works or articles. Though she clarifies that it has happened before. That's the reason she always liked to have her am, so no one could dispute her over what she was writing, causing Zima to say something interesting, that it won't matter if the am is here or not for his story. It's at this she realizes there was another reason that he picked her, as he tells her he wants to help her. It's at this point that we cut back over to some stuff we see in the episode. We get a more detailed explanation of his blue period and just how big these blue paintings and pieces really got. While they started out as these 20-kilometer paintings that just were right over these private islands, they continued all the way up into the atmosphere until it reached a point that there were no structures that would be able to sustain them on any planet. It was at that point that Zima began to reach this level of fame to where people that weren't even interested in art knew exactly who he was. Of course, he was the weird cyborg artist guy that did these insanely giant paintings of one specific color that seems to be named after him, but even that was over 100 years ago. The paintings continued to the point to where they were 1,000 kilometers across, just these giant floating pieces through space. So much so that there were no individuals that could actually invest to get some of his artworks. Instead, it had reached the point it was entire stellar economic systems that had to come together to get one of his pieces. Though even all of that was still tiny in comparison to what his projects became. He did these things called moon wrappings, to where he just fully encased a moon in one of his paintings, and did this multiple times. Then, in as little as 2 months after, he did what I mentioned in the beginning of this video of painting the entire equatorial belt of a gas giant, the same color, Zima Blue, with only 6 months later after that, going and changing the actual chemistry of a comet, so it would then streak across the entire universe with a Zima Blue tail. It's here that Carrie admits that even through all of this, seeing all of these projects and even attending many of the unveilings when these were happening, that she was no closer to a story. There was all this cool stuff going on and she still didn't understand why. What was the importance of this color? As she then admits that her, just like millions of other people, when they heard about his final artwork, she just had to be there to see it, not expecting this moment to be here with Zima himself to watch a sunset together in his own home, where he has a table already laid out with 2 chairs just for them to watch the blue sea and the blue sky as the sun will begin to set, the perfect color and the perfect evening, all of it with a bowl of fruit sitting on the table and a bottle of red wine and white wine, of which Zima asks which one she wants, red or white. I open my mouth as if to answer him, but nothing came. Normally, in that instant between the question and the response, the am would have silently directed my choice to one of the two options. Not having the am's prompt felt like a mental stall in my thoughts. It's a very odd but honest moment that she has with herself, but Zima understands. He was the one that told her to leave it behind, wanting to speak directly with her and knowing that this was going to be something that came up. So he says red, I think, unless she has any objections, and she states that she can decide things for herself. This is all just very strange for her, which it is, because she's been living like this for so long. And it's at this point that we find out that her memory built up many, many years ago. She reached a limit for what she could take in and keep there. And she describes it like a house with too much furniture, as though anything else that gets moved in means something else needs to come out. That's the reason it's so nice for her to have the am to take everything in for her, so she has a way to go back and always access those memories without having to take something out. This is my favorite part of the story with what happens next, because instead of talking more with her about her explanation of how her memory's been filled up, Zima says, let's go back to the wine for a moment. Would the am have always recommended one over the other? If you had a preference, would it have leaned to that one preference every single time? Carrie has to clarify here, because it's not just that simple. If she had a very strong preference for red wine over white wine and despised white wine, then of course it would always suggest red wine, but she doesn't. And so sometimes she likes one, sometimes she likes the other, and it switches back and forth depending, causing Zima to ask if it's random, if it's just as likely to suggest red wine or white wine on any occasion. But that's not it either. The am has been with her for so long and has seen her drink all of these different glasses of wines over the course of the last few hundred years that it knows down to the very specific detail of how her day went versus the temperature or what time of day during what season, on which one she would likely prefer. And then it would recommend that, and that's the one she would pick. Zima then wonders if she would always unquestionably take the am's advice. And she admits that, yeah, why wouldn't she? The thing knows me better than I know myself. It knows what my preference is going to be. Why would I go against it to just make some sort of statement about free will if following its decisions is what's gonna make me happy in the first place? If I'm happy, what do I care? Zima has to stop and clarify here, because he's not criticizing her. He's just pointing out that she is unlike the majority of people now. He then explains the difference between her am and everyone else having these neural implants, and how it's basically just an extension of their memory. It's a piece of them. They don't have to ask the am anything. It's just there in their own mind. But it also changes the same way that our memories do. The am takes everything in constantly. It's a photograph, it's a video, it's always there, it's always the same, it doesn't change. There is no misremembering with an am device. But with having those implants, your memories are so one with you that if you don't pick up on a detail, or if you misremember something when you recall it, that's just part of your memory now. Zima then gives a name to what he is talking about, calling it living memory, and what the am is doing is just photography. It is so solid that it leaves out any room for imagination. So when she would go to recall any events, there wouldn't be any room for her. Imagine that on nearly every occasion, when you had cause to sit outside on an afternoon like this, you had chosen red wine over white, and generally had no reason to regret that choice. But on one occasion, for one reason or another, you were persuaded to choose white, against the judgment of the Am, and it was wonderful. Everything came together magically: the company, the conversation, the late afternoon ambience, the splendid view, the euphoric rush of being slightly drunk. A perfect afternoon turned into a perfect evening. It's funny to me how through all of this, my memory makes an odd connection, but it seems to apply very well to here. In one of my favorite TV shows of all time, there is a character who meets a young woman when he's in school, and when he's there, they have this thing that they do together. And tragedy strikes, she passes away, but even in the short few weeks that they knew each other, it affected him so greatly that he no longer even walked anywhere that he went. He began to skip, literally going on to change his name to Skips. And some of you right now are having the realization I'm talking about the regular show. It's like, it hits me so right, because that's what happened. He had this one moment that was so important to him that he just no longer walked again.
I'll skip till the end of eternity. It's my way of being close to her.
In the words of Zima, the Am would never tolerate that. It wouldn't make any sense for him to walk his entire life, and then just because he skipped a couple times with this woman that he liked a lot, that he would then skip for the rest of his life, literally going on to change his name. The next time she would have a moment like this, to choose between red or white, the Am would still suggest red. It wouldn't deviate because she chose white this one time, but she might. And it's at this point that it begins to click for Carrie what he is getting at. As he explains that it would take her choosing white over and over and over again against the advice of the Am until eventually it would update its system and then start saying she needs to drink white. Still leaving that weird room of, what if a different evening or at a different place it suggests white and she chose red, and everything also went great. It's here that she is wishing that they would just talk about him instead of whatever this is, because she doesn't like the way this is making her feel. So she has to question him on what difference is it really whether these memories are in my head or if they're in this little machine that follows me around. As he then explains that it makes all the difference in the world, because one is this fixed point and it's always going to be the same, when the other one can highlight different things and get rid of other things. Like on that perfect evening, there could have been a fly floating around her face, but every time she goes back to visit that awesome memory, the fly is going to slowly be forgotten, and the emphasis on the sun, the emphasis on the company she had, the emphasis on that evening is going to become better and better because of how good of a memory it is. It's here that Zima begins to make a statement about art and truth and the fallibility of memory and how the two are all combined, and she's just had enough. She stands up and says that she didn't come here for a lecture or whatever in the world this is. She came here to interview him. And then, because they have so much more to talk about, he stands and says there is a bigger point to what he is making right now. It involves me and it involves you. And then he asks her if she would accompany him for a walk, because he would like to show her the swimming pool. It's as they come up on the pool that she begins to sort of laugh, thinking that this is a joke for some reason, wondering if he's kidding right now, because all of these seats in the stadium that is basically here around this pool can't be for his final work. That doesn't make any sense, especially after doing so much throughout the galaxy, painting entire planets. This here is just a bit of a letdown, but he clarifies that this is what his entire work has been leading up to. For him, this is everything. A shabby-looking swimming pool? It's not just any old swimming pool. Carrie doesn't understand. She's like, this pool? This shabby-looking pool is everything? What do you mean? Like, even the tiles that are being glued on right now are cracked, many of them. They're falling apart. There's so much to this that is just not what anyone would ever expect from you. How is this so meaningful? And it's here that they go on a walk as he begins to describe his entire origin story and everything he was able to remember. And the problem that he had in realizing his memory only went back a few hundred years. You see, the blue stuff wasn't intended. It was by accident one day when he was painting one of his murals that a little bit of paint went in the wrong direction, and then the moment he saw the color, it was as if his entire life had been leading to this one point, to this one color, as if somehow he needed to set it free because it would set him free, and it just meant so much, but he didn't understand why. He then tells her a story of a man who spent his entire life searching for this one specific shade of blue that he remembered from his childhood. He began to despair of ever finding it, thinking he must have imagined that precise shade, that it could not possibly exist in nature. Then, one day, he chanced upon it. It was the color of a beetle in a museum of natural history. He wept for joy. Now, the beetle was not Zima Blue. There's a much bigger issue with Zima trying to find his own blue shade out there in the universe because he doesn't remember his childhood. He doesn't remember where anything happened. The farthest back he can remember is when he went to get the cybernetic upgrades on a planet called
Kharkov 8. It specialized in illicit cybernetic modifications.
This is where he became what he now is. Of course, he upgraded himself over the course of the last few hundred years that he has been roaming the cosmos, but all of it started here on this planet, where all he remembered of any of this was a man named Kobargo. And so one day he traveled back to the planet to see if he can find Kobargo, but instead, the clinic that he used to run is now being ran by his grandson. And it took some convincing, but eventually he was able to get a hold of all of the records to find out the truth about himself. And according to those records, the truth is that he was never a man. Zima never existed before he arrived there. We have Carrie interjecting here to us, thinking that it would be so nice to just have pen and paper right now, or some kind of recording device, or any way that she could take in every single thing that he is saying right now, because she doesn't want to miss any of this. So she questions, then what was he? A machine, he said, a complex robot, an autonomous artificial intelligence. I was already centuries old when I arrived on Kharkov 8, with full legal independence.
But you're a man, with machine parts.
She completely denies this because it doesn't make any sense, and he tries to explain that according to the records, his body and system was grown in a vat. So he does have parts of him that are biological, but as far as which parts are in more control between biological and mechanical, he's not even sure anymore. Carrie proposes that maybe the clinic lied to him, that they just wanted him to leave and get away from here because they're likely still doing these illicit procedures. But he's positive that they were telling the truth. They would have rather him not known or seen the files at all, but he did. That wasn't the only files that he looked into. He was able to go back and trace around the exact same time of when he should have arrived on the planet, because it would have been marked down for any autonomous robot arriving here on Kharkov 8. And sure enough, there was only one that arrived during that same time, and he was able to find where it came from there. And he follows all the way back as far as he can, constantly going around and around, trying his hardest to follow this fading trail of memories and connections between where this weird little robot slowly grew and came to the point that it gained its independence. He states that it took a long time, even with the trail getting fainter and fainter, but he had persistence on his side. And it's here that Carrie also clarifies for him that, hey, you also had money. He's just like, yeah, money helped a lot. And it's because of both of those things that he eventually was able to trace all the way back to a time when he was much simpler. Before that, I was a simpler machine, like an heirloom or a pet. I was passed from one owner to the next between generations. They added things to me. They made me cleverer. How did you begin as a project? Their walk around the island leads them back to the pool again as Zima realizes that it's ready. Tomorrow he will have it sealed, and then they will begin to fill it with water the day after and cycle it through until it has the perfect clarity for his final performance, of which will take him back to where he started, to the exact same pool that he was created to clean over 1,000 years ago here on Earth, over in California, where a young man who had an interest in robotics decided to build a bunch of little machines to help him with all different chores around the house. And I love that some of them are listed off other than just a pool cleaning robot, which, as cool as that is, we have one that is just like this sticky-limbed spider that would climb around the walls of the house to dust all of the picture frames. Another one would lay in wait for flies and cockroaches. And whenever it caught them, it would then digest them using the natural chemicals that broke down from their biomass to power itself to another room in the house to start the process again. With another one just going around and painting the walls to match the colors of whatever season it currently is. But even with as cool as some of those are, it was the one that was in the pool that really stuck out to this man that invented it. That's the reason he gave this little robot full color vision, as well as a tiny sense of satisfaction from just doing its job and doing it whenever it wanted. It had enough processing power from being built out of these old computer parts to decide for itself how to clean, when to clean, as well as when to surface to charge itself with these solar panels on its back. It was that little pool cleaner that taught the man so much about robotics that he was able to build these little package units of house cleaners and sell them in magazines. That then became very popular and very profitable. His business grew to the point that within the next 10 years, there were robots everywhere throughout the world. And even through all of that, he never forgot about the little robot that it all started with there in his pool. And he continued to experiment and to add to it, to give it more of itself. It was the only machine that the man never took apart. Everything else he would use for pieces for other machines that he was building, but that one he kept around because of how much he cared for it. Until eventually he died, and it was passed on to the man's daughter. And the man's daughter also had an interest in robotics, and she continued to do the exact same thing, slowly adding to it, slowly building it up to a point that it was able to be transferred when she died to her son, who lived on Mars, who continued to do the same thing through generations and generations, adding and adding and adding to the point that who we now know as Zima gained his autonomy and eventually made his way to Kharkov 8. And even after all of that time, Zima was still able to trace back to where the house was and where the pool was, so he could then bring it here and have it put back together with the exact same tiles that were in it all those years ago. These tiles are colored Zima Blue, I said. Zima Blue is the color of the tiles, he gently corrected. It just happened to be the shade that the young man used for his swimming pool tiles. Carrie then tells us of Zima's final performance and his unveiling of his greatest work of art. How they had rolled back the shade so people could sit up in spaceships high above where they were to watch from a distance. As he walks over to the edge of the pool, having already told her exactly how it would go, and her knowing that many people wouldn't believe what was about to happen. As he jumps into the pool and then slowly begins to shut down his brain functions, allowing himself to fall into pieces until there was only enough left of him that he could revert back to that point of what he used to be. Everything he has ever done has led up to this point that I am reminded of two stories. One that is a short film here on YouTube called Happiness. I assume you've seen it because it's been around for a long time and it's very popular. It's by Steve Cutts, and I'll link it down in the description for you to go and watch it if you haven't. But think of the idea of a bunch of rats, and they're trapped within not just the rat race of work life and everything that goes into that, but also of seeking out happiness, trying so many different things to find something that stands out, that makes them feel whole, that makes them feel happy, whether it's in stuff or cars or money or alcohol or drugs or anything in between that could bring happiness. They chase after it and it never seems to work out. They're seeking something through all of it, but it's just not the right thing. It's nothing that ever brings them that true happiness that they're seeking after. And I believe that here, Zima was able to pass through all of that different stuff, literally traveling the entire cosmos to reach this point of having finally found what he was looking for. And the other thing I'm reminded of is the parable of the fisherman, where a fisherman comes in to dock his boat one day after going out and catching a few fish, and he's met by a businessman who is very interested in what he does and wants to talk to him about bettering his life. First, though, wondering how long it took him to catch the fish that he did, and he tells the businessman just a little while, to which the businessman then questions if he stayed out a little longer, could he catch more? And the fisherman tells him that he could, but this is enough for him and his family. This is everything that he needs, causing the businessman to then wonder what he does with the rest of his time. And so the fisherman tells him that he sleeps late, he fishes a little, he plays with his children, him and his wife get to take naps together, they stroll through the village each evening, they were able to sip wine, they play the guitar, they hang out and just do all of this stuff. He has a very busy life doing all of this, but the businessman scoffs at this, telling him that he went to Harvard and that he knows exactly what he needs to do to help the man, because what he should do is spend more time in the boat fishing. So that way he could then sell the fish, buy a bigger boat, hire some guys to go out there and fish with him, and then they can catch a whole bunch more fish that they could then sell, and he could hire and get another boat and hire more people and build up this giant business that will then make him so much money. And after this big long spiel about what he needs to do, the fisherman questions, how long is all of this going to take? And the businessman tells him 15, 20 years. But then what? And the businessman tells him that's the best part. He would then be able to sell the company and sell shares and everything in between and make millions off of this. At that point, he would be able to retire, move to a small coastal fishing village where he would be able to sleep late, fish a little, spend time with his kids, take naps with his wife, stroll through their village nearby, spend the evening sipping wine, playing guitar, and hanging out, having a good time with those around him. All of these extra steps to come back around to one simple place, just like Zima here. That was enough for him. It had been enough for him in that pool in California, and it was enough for him now, 1,000 years later, in the same pool, but on another world, around another sun, in a distant part of the same galaxy. In this, Zima was able to achieve something that I believe every artist would ever want to do, because seeking purpose in the things that we do hold more importance than receiving a pat on the back or congratulations from those around us. That's art. That's true art. It doesn't need to mean anything to anyone else but the artist. That's why so many people here could be confused about what Zima was doing, because they're just not gonna understand. It wasn't for them to understand, though. At this point, everything he has done has been leading up to this moment, and this is something for him. And that's a huge difference between what oftentimes happens with art. It's just made for the money. It's made to receive that appreciation and that acceptance from all of these people. Art like this often, though, becomes devoid of meaning and ultimately ends up feeling empty. The murals were undeniably impressive. From a standpoint of composition and technique, they were unquestionably brilliant. But there was also something bleak and chilling about them. They were landscapes without a human presence, save for the implied viewpoint of the artist himself. They can look amazing and still feel like this, just bleak. You know what I mean? That, like, take this place, for example. So many videos, and yet a lot of them feel empty. Like on the last video I made, I got this comment that I haven't been able to stop thinking about, of somebody realizing for just a moment that I am a person, that I'm not just here for entertainment. And it's just so weird, because I completely understand. I make these to be entertaining, but I make these for a much bigger reason than that. And maybe that's why I wanted to make this video. No one asked for this. This video is for me. I wanted to talk about this story. It hit me in a very specific way, just like a lot of the videos that I make do. And that's the reason that I make them, is because they hit me a certain way. And I feel like it would be neat to share my thoughts and to share a little bit of myself that I put into each one of these. And I don't know if you can specifically call this art, but there is definitely a creative process that goes into every single one of my videos. And it's easy to let that process become really repetitive and dull and inhuman. That was the way I always felt about his work as well. It was vast and inhuman as its inspiration. And only Zima's cyborg modifications lent his art any kind of uniqueness. It was like praising a painting because it had been done by someone holding a brush between their teeth. Making a video about this episode or this story could have been as simple as just going straight through and cutting myself out of the recap completely, just as I've done in the past. But then what's the point? The story speaks for itself, just as the cosmos did when Zima would paint them, but me, the actual me, explaining my perspective and what this story means to me is something else. Whether other people agree with my interpretation of this abstract story or not doesn't really matter. Just as so many people, both in the story and outside, not fully grasping Zima's point and letting everything go, to spend the rest of his existence circling this ancient pool. It'll be greatly profound to some and completely idiotic to others, but to Zima, it's everything. Some people get it, Most people never will. But that's art. And while that's it for Zima's story, all of this is still from Carrie's perspective. This is her recollection of what happened that day, her true recollection from her own memory. She tells us at the end that she was surprised how much she remembered after she left. And it's because of this that she realized her dependency on her am was not as severe as she had once believed. That's why she got rid of it shortly after. Had a set of the neural memory extensions installed to get her by for another 400 or 500 years, as well as having all of the AM's recorded memories installed in her own as well. Those memories, of course, didn't feel the same as everything else, but with each recollection of those memories, it slowly softened the edges. And while they will become less accurate over time, those highlights will begin to glow a little brighter each time. And maybe that's the real point in remembering anyway. Not to lose the truth of things, but to gain a sense of self. To allow those past events to shape who you are, just like Zima's description of a perfect evening and a choice of white wine instead of red, leading to a complete break away from a set pattern in life, both good and bad patterns. I've talked a lot about many of those bad patterns we can have in life in many of my past videos. And sometimes all it takes is one moment, one encounter, one little deviation to break away from that path. Even when other forces in our lives try to hold us where we are, actively making a choice to change is a big deal. And the whole reason Zima reached out to Carrie in the first place. I know why he spoke to me. It wasn't just my way with a biographical story. It was his desire to help someone move on before he did the same. There's something amazing to be said about the way Alistair writes these stories that hit me in such a personal way, because just like in Beyond the Aquila Rift, I find myself again as one of the characters to you. If I'm able to help just one person out there, I will count it as a win, though even still, you will never know how much creating these videos has helped me. And you don't need to understand the point of all of this, the point of Zima choosing to jump into that old pool or Carrie choosing to get rid of her am. Both and all of this is to emphasize the importance of true connection. For Carrie, this connection was being hindered by a filter, the am, to the point that if you were speaking with her, you were instead speaking with her am the entire time. It was you I wanted to talk to, Carrie, not some surrogate recording device. It's the same reason my favorite film is The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Sometimes it's better to be there in the moment, not stuck in the mindset of needing to capture it forever through a camera. Yes, you get a picture or a video or whatever, but you missed the moment. You lost the chance of having a memory that would be cherished for the rest of your life.
If I like a moment, I don't like to have the distraction of the camera.
For me, for as many kids as I have, there's so many moments that I don't want to miss out on. There's so many moments with my wife that through our lives together, I don't want to miss because I'm too busy trying to capture the moment in a picture or a video forever. Like, I love making these videos, but this is so different than living life. This is so different than everything outside of here. A long time from now, I'm not going to need to remember what I've said here in this video. It'll be here in this video. Just as Zima had that memory from long ago, and it's through that he felt this feeling of connection between him and his creator, something that after searching all of the cosmos, he wasn't able to find again, not until he found that pool once more and returned to it, ultimately making the biggest statement he could through the progression of his art over so many years for all of it to come down to the immeasurable significance of connection.
My search for truth is finished at last. I'm going home.
I know from seeing all of the different thumbnails and seeing all the different people that have explained this story in many different ways, trying to understand the purpose behind it and the meaning behind it. And I think that's why I love this story so much, because with every video, I try to avoid watching those videos so I can make sure that I have my own thoughts and opinions about whatever I'm going to be presenting to you. And this here is the perfect encapsulation of that. Because for me, that was the point the whole time, is that Zima's purpose and reasoning to do what he did was for himself. It was all not to appeal to this greater audience of millions that he had built up, but simply this small little thing of returning back to this place that he was happiest, that he remembers from so long ago that he had to go off into the cosmos and come all the way back to this point to find. It's Carrie's side of the story that I think makes it clear for me on what the purpose behind him wanting to help her in the same way that he was being helped was. Because he was finally able to get her to understand that by leaving the Am behind, he was finally fully present for a conversation for the first time in so long, which is the most important thing when it comes to having a connection with anyone. So my hopes for you is to do the same, to have these genuine connections with people. Without it, everything's just so lonely. And I know that for me, that's something that I am not good with. I know I talked about it a little bit in the last video, but one of the things that really messes with my mental health is when I am alone a lot, everything just seems to really spiral out of my control. So to have those other people in my life and to be blessed with these people that I'm surrounded by, just as I've talked about in the Session 9 video, and just as I talked about in this last one on Vivarium, it's so helpful to me because of those connections. But I think that's the reason I love this episode and this story so much, is because it can mean different things to each one of us. While I see this being about connection and how important it is, you might just see it as some guy that really, really liked Blue. But as it said at the very end of the story, some people get it, most people never will. But that's art. And sometimes you do insane things for art, because I don't know if you noticed, but the sun came up. I've been doing this for a while. It's not as long as what I normally do this. This one actually went quite quick. I just started at like 4 in the morning like a dum-dum. But just like Zima, I have my own reasons for doing this to myself. And so I just have to thank you for watching me do this to myself. The fact that you made it to the end of this video means a lot to me. And of course, it's always just the best way to help out the channel. You can hit like all of the buttons down there, anything in between, especially with subscribing, because I'm getting close to 200K, and that's awesome. That lets me see a physical number to let me know I'm doing something that you enjoy. But also the fact that making it to the end of the video literally tells YouTube, hey, people want to watch this. And then it helps to push it even more, which is great. And I thank you again for being here. And of course, as always, I have to thank all of the channel members. They're the reasons that I can justify buying not just the first book, but all of the books that came out, as well as an entire stack of books that you can see right here. There's a whole stack of books that I bought to also cover on the channel, because there's so many other good stories out there that I want to cover. So if you have any suggestions for some, please let me know, because I am looking for more that are like Beyond the Aquila Rift, as well as A Short Stay in Hell, because I get asked to cover more stories like both of those than I do anything else. And I would gladly do it I just have to find them. So again, thanks to all the channel members, and thanks to you specifically. Right now, yes, we're making a connection right now. Thanks for watching this video. It really does mean a lot, and I'm so glad you're here. There's a reason that you find me in the comments of my own videos a lot, and I try my hardest to keep up with them, but the more the channel grows, the more difficult it gets. There's also a reason you can find me on a ton of like random smaller channels in the comments, and it's the funniest thing when people are like, why are you here? Why are you here looking at these magic videos? Because I have a problem. I'm just dropping them. I have a problem. It's not a problem. It's amazing. It's the best. It's a Cryptgast, which is why I want you to know that I really do mean it when I tell you that you can always take my hand, have an extra blessed day, so I can see you in the next one.